Hello and welcome to Traditional Painting the Digital Way. This is where I use digital painting apps to teach traditional painting techniques. This is part 4 of my Castle Ruins series, and in this video we're going to go ahead and work on the grass and the water and the old crumbling wall that's in the foreground. If you're following along traditionally, I have a list of all the pastel and the paper and all the tools that I use for pastel painting in part 1 of this series. We're going to be using Infinite Painter for Android, and we're going to go ahead and start by adding a little bit more highlight to the grass around the castle. You can use a pastel stick for this if you're following along traditionally, or you can use a pencil, and you just want to go ahead and make a light green color around the castle because this is going to be where the sun rays are hitting it. So just go ahead and kind of smudge that in and make it look like it goes behind the castle, in front of it, and all the way around it, just where the sun rays are going to be hitting. And this is probably a phthalo yellow green type or light greens. Sometimes they call them spring green. It will depend on the different kinds of pastels that you have as to what the names of the colors are going to be. And then I'm adding a little bit of darker green in the back that helps make it look like it's in shadow there behind the castle. It also helps separate the hills, the foreground hills, from the middle ground hills. And just go ahead and add that all the way around the castle, and sort of some darker green in the front and in the back here. Put some right there on the middle ground hill, between the middle ground hill and the furthest hill away from you, and that will make it separate and give you a little bit of depth to your picture. And I'm using the Julienne brush for this, or you can switch to the painter brushes, the paint brush category, but just remember that you want the texture on because you want this to look real grainy and like a pastel. So I'm working on the shoreline a little bit here, going back and adding a little bit more of light and dark pockets to the grass, and this just gives it a more realistic look, like it's different species of grass, and that there's dirt, and that the hills are uneven, they're not perfectly smooth, there's little hollows in them, and rocks and gravel and bare spots. You just want to give it kind of a realistic look to the grass. Just don't make it all solid, and break up the greens with brown colors and different shades of green as well. So here I'm going to go ahead and merge the layers down, and so I can start a new layer. Anytime I add a new subject, I like to put it on a separate layer, just because if you mess up, it's easier to go back and fix. So I'm going to go ahead and add in the old crumbling rock wall right here in the foreground, and we're putting it in the corner as an eye stopper. And an eye stopper is just something that you put in the corners of your pictures to keep the viewer's eye inside your picture, and to help it look interesting so they don't lose interest and go on to something else. So we're going to go ahead and add the dark underpainting. It's still called underpainting even though it's pastel, but the dark first layer, and you can use dark blue or dark purple, and then go ahead and add a lighter gray to it. You can use your pastel pencil for this if you're following along traditionally. You can use your blending stomp to smooth the gray in on top of the rocks there. And we want to go ahead and just kind of make it look like it's an old crumbled ruin of a wall there. And then I want to go ahead and add just a little bit more towards the shoreline to make it look like the wall extended out towards the lake a little bit, or maybe the lake has risen and it's actually swallowed up some of the rocks that were part of this old crumbling wall. And you can go ahead and use your pencil, your pastel pencil, if you're following along traditionally, to make the littler rocks. And this also gives it just a nice depth look, because it shows smaller rocks in the middle ground, and then you have your large crumbling wall rocks in the front. And so then I want to go ahead and kind of just work on the edge of the lake a little bit here and sort of smooth things in and try to get just a sort of a glaze look to the lake. It's not going to have a lot of movement to the water, but it's kind of like a still lake. And here I want to go ahead and take the Julienne tool and make a little bit of a shoreline by adding burnt sienna under the edges of the grass. And then you can take a white pastel pencil and make the shoreline. And you use white or an off-white color just to make it look like there's little ripples up against the edge of the shoreline. And then take that same color that you have for the grass and add it into your water. You want to give a little bit of an indication of the hills. And looking at one of my references, the castle looks like it's too far back to actually show up in the lake, so it's mainly just going to be the banks that are right next to the water. So I'm just putting in mostly green and a little bit of brown colors, just trying to give the idea that the banks are reflecting into the lake. And here I'm using a little bit of a glaze of white, and that makes it look more like the water. And then go ahead and sort of add back details into the shoreline with a pastel pencil or your Julienne tool or your paint tool set on very thin, very small. And then you kind of want to smudge those in. Don't leave those in real big, because like I said, this is going to be still water. But you want a few indications of ripples just to show that it is a lake and that it is water. And I'm switching back and forth between the paint category and the sketch category. And both of these tools just kind of help me get the pastel look that I want. So I'm adding a little bit more brown color here into the lake, just to give it a little bit more like it's reflecting the shoreline. And then I'm just smudging it out, and I'm actually throwing a little bit of some pale blue over it just to give it more of a water reflection. And you can use your stick pastels for this. Just use a very light hand. Don't bear down on it. Just kind of put a very light glaze on there. And you can turn the opacity way down when you're doing this in Infinite Painter. And I'm just working on the shoreline again a little bit more, adding in some more colors, adding in some green. Just kind of giving it the look of the banks in front of it. And then I want to go ahead and highlight the rocks a little bit more. You can add a lighter gray color here. You can use your pastel pencil if you're following along traditionally, just to get kind of a rough rock look. And you want to go ahead and do that to the middle ground rocks, and also the ones in the foreground. Just give a sort of a rough, rugged look, because these are old crumbling stones that have fallen out of a wall, and so they look like they might have been, worked on a little bit by human hands, but they're also really weathered and jagged, and they're just crumbling away. So you want to go ahead and just kind of keep that look to these rocks, and just kind of work on them a little bit towards the shoreline as well. And that just gives good depth to your painting. One of my favorite pastel painters is Anne Sudworth, and I just wanted to show a couple of her books that she has. She has Gothic Fantasies and Enchanted World, and she does castle ruins and all kinds of fantasy subjects. She also does things called earthlight trees, and it looks like the trees are glowing at night, and she works exclusively in pastel, and she just does beautiful work. Now, you can't get these new anymore, but you can still get them at Amazon, so I'll leave my affiliate links down below in the description so that you can go ahead and find them. And she just does beautiful work, and I'd encourage you to check her out because her stuff is just fantastic. So this is the end of part 4 of our Castle Ruin series. And in part 5, I'm going to go ahead and add in the sunbeams and just put the final touches to the picture. So thanks everybody for watching. Thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments down below, and I will catch you later.